Friends, welcome to the 239th session of Legal Empowerment Through Interaction lecture series. As the journey continues, we have our own family member, Advocate Anil Malhotra sir, to address us on a very interesting topic, which I'm sure that he'll be doing in his own inimitable style. First of all, let us thank Justice Mohammad Mustaq sir for introducing this wonderful speaker to our platform. Today, we got an added bonus, I would say, in the sense like to render the introductory remarks, we have Honorable Mr. Justice C.S. Dias, the Judge of the Kerala High Court, who has been specializing in this field during his days of practice and has spent wonderful judgments regarding the aspects with which the today's speaker would be addressing. A very, very important topic, child adoptions and a zigzag trajectory. This being a thoroughly informal platform, we directly request Honorable Mr. Justice C.S. Dias to render the introductory remarks. Sir, please. We also recognize the presence of Justice Ramakrishnan sir and all of you wonderful participants in this journey of discovery, enlightenment, and empowerment. Sir, over to you.
Better feels that gives you a lot of sense of satisfaction and joy in bringing happiness of a child to a family and a family to have a child, rather than seeing the agony of long drawn battles of separation, custody, divorce, etc. As you all are all aware, concept of adoption is one as old as human civilization. Though the trend has changed over the years from a spiritual and religious-centric mode of adoption to a family-centric adoption. In the olden days, the people indulged in adoption for the purpose of having their perpetuation of their lineage and as well as for the spiritual requirements. But as time passed by and the need for having a biological child has crept in, and so is the change in the law also. So if those of you are very interested to know about the background and the way in which it evolved, I would always ask you to read one of the celebrated judgments on the field by the Supreme Court. It's Lakshmikant Pandey versus Union of India, and the modification judgments which were there. I would rate it at par with Menaka Gandhi, A.K. Gopalan, and Kesavananda Bari. Because if you go through the judgment, how beautifully Justice P.N. Bhagavati, as he then was, and he was the author of the judgment, the foresight that he had in laying down the normative and procedural guidelines and safeguards for doing both in-country and inter-country adoptions for the want of statutory law. In fact, the judgment has lived its life. Even today, it is being used, and it has actually been embedded into the legislations that were subsequently formed through the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act. And I'm always happy and overwhelmed to see the way in which Justice Bhagavati started the judgment by using the most apt quote by Milton. It's quite awesome. It says that a child is to man as a morning is to a day. So that is the importance of a child, or the significance of a child to a man. Without morning, there is no day. Without a child, there is no man. That is how Justice Bhagavati has started. So if those of you are really interested, should always go read the judgments. There are about 5 of them, the 3 important ones, 84, 86, and 87. And how Justice Bhagavati had, in a public interest litigation, invoking Article 32 of the Constitution, how he has molded and seen that the welfare of the children are protected. And as you know, in the 80s, the legislation, there was no legislation, and it was all quite experimental. And the way in which he has secured the welfare of the children is worth reading. I don't want to take much of your time because we have a very eminent speaker, a subject expert, who's practicing across Pan India to deliver the lecture on the subject. Advocate Anil Malhotra, a multifaceted personality, an author, a legal analyst, eminent jurist, and most sought after speaker. And as Advocate Sham said, he is now part of our family in the latest virtual room, and who also specializes in the field of adoption. And I think he has given the best caption to today's lecture by saying the zigzag trajectory in the field of adoption. Because as when I started practice, I always remember that we used to always tell. In fact, I have practiced before Justice Hariprasad when he was first the district judge in Talasheri, where I told him that there is no statutory law. That was the problem then. But today, the problem is we have too many laws and things are going in a different way. That's why Mr. Anil Malhotra has put trajectory in which the legislation or the subject has been shaped in over the last 3 decades. So I don't think Sham could have got a better person to speak on the subject. I'm certain that we are going to have a very enthralling session on adoption, and we'll be taken through the different dimensions on the subject. So we are all ready for the show. Over to you, Advocate Anil Malhotra. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay sir. Anil Malhotra sir, the stage is all yours.
Honorable Justice Dias, Justice Ramakrishnan, my friend Sham, Mr. Rao, esteemed participants, friends, I'm humbled by the warm introduction to the topic, and both to me by Justice Dias. I have known that he's a scholar and somebody who has built, and somebody who first gave the striking judgment when, as he very rightly put it, there is a plethora of laws which has entered into this traditional Hindu concept of a son or a daughter being born and the progeny going forward, particularly according to the Hindu Shastras, which are embedded and ingrained in our society and our system both. But a division bench judgment dated 7th of January 2020, KV Sivarama, was really what injected a lot of sense and a lot of relief into tight-fisted authorities who tried to take over a child who had been rehabilitated in the family. Was an eye-opener. And this has now been observed in the judgment given by the Delhi High Court recently. And but very briefly to tell you about what happened in the case of K. Sivarama, which is a reported judgment. This is 2021 KLT 294. 2021 KLT 294. Now, in this judgment, authored by Honorable Justice Harilal and Justice Dias, the facts were very interesting. It was a case of a domestic adoption in which a child had been adopted by virtue of the natural parents giving and the adoptive parents taking, and it was followed by an adoption deed, and there was a giving and taking over. But a very energetic, enthusiastic, and overzealous child welfare committee went to the extent of picking up the child from the home of the adoptive parents and just taking the child into custody and putting him in a welfare home. This was not the rehabilitation, but the de-rehabilitation process, which was carried out very cruelly. And happily, instead of going into a civil proceeding in a normal family court or a civil court, a writ of habeas corpus was preferred very, very appropriately. And in this petition, in the judgment, the keynote questions which the Honorable Court framed were whether the adoption deed and the adoption under the provisions of HAMA can be said to be in contravention of the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act, and whether the Juvenile Justice Act overrides the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, and whether the child is in unlawful detention of the adoptive parents. So this was the backdrop in which the judgment was laid down. Before I actually go to how the questions are answered, I think it will be important to lay down what are these two contrasting laws under which the entire concept of adoption is laid down for the benefit of those who are not familiar with this topic. Now, traditionally and conventionally, and insofar Hindus are concerned, which excludes Christians and Muslims as a generic definition, the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act of 1956 essentially talks of the codification of a law for adoption and maintenance among Hindus. And it says anybody who is a Buddhist, Jain, Sikh by religion, or any child, legitimate or illegitimate, who is belongs to such a family, or any child, legitimate or illegitimate, who has been abandoned and whose parent is not known and who's brought up as a Hindu, will be deemed to be a Hindu for this purposes. So chapter 2 of the Hamma lays down essentially what is the requirement of adoption. So section 5 as a principal section says that any adoption under this chapter in controversy, in contravention of the provisions laid down, would be null and void. Now, the requisites of a valid adoption are that the person who's giving in adoption has the capacity to do so. The person who's taking in adoption has the capacity to do so. That the person who's capable of being taken in adoption is so met with, and other conditions are complied with. Now, the capacity of a Hindu male and a female to take an adoption are in section 7 and 8, and the persons capable of giving an adoption are in section 9. So, child can be given by adoptive parents and taken by adoptive parents and taken by parents who are wishing to adopt. And if the child is parentage is not known or parents are not available to do so, then section 9 says that a court of competent jurisdiction, which is a civil court and not a family court, it can take into adoption. It can subject to the permission of the court. Then the definition of the word court, which I have signified in one of the previous sessions, and which has not been touched by the recent amendment of the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2021. Now, court here means a city civil court or a district court within the local limits of whose jurisdiction child to be adopted ordinarily resides. So it is not the family court, it is the civil court. And this court does not mean the district magistrate, unlike the amendment which has come in 2021. So this is still retained. Now, the most important ingredient of adoption is in section 11. Section 11 talks of the conditions of adoption, and the most important one is that the child to be adopted is actually given and taken in adoption by the parents or under the authority by somebody who's intending to do so. And in case the parentage is not known, then it is brought up by the family of its adoption. So the intention is essentially what constitutes the primary requirement of a Hindu adoption under Hamma. Now, there is a ceremony of Datta Homan whose ingredients are unspecified, but it is a religious ceremony. It involves certain religious rites and rituals, but the proviso says that the performance of the ceremony of Datta Homan shall not be essential to the validity of the adoption. Now, the long and short of this requirement is that the Supreme Court is very clearly reiterated in the latest judgment of M. Vanaja versus Sarla Devi. This is AIR 2020 Supreme Court 1293. AIR 2020 Supreme Court 1293. 1293, sorry. Now, in this case, though it is a contested issue on whether an adoption took place or not. But the ratio of the judgment is that the mandate of the Act of 1956 is that no adoption shall be made unless it has been made in compliance with the conditions mentioned in the Act of 1956. The two essential conditions are the consent of the wife and the actual ceremony of adoption having taken place, and this essential requirement not having been fulfilled will invalidate any adoption. So the law laid down by earlier judgments of the Supreme Court in L. Devi Prasad and other cases has been reiterated, and this is the latest view. I have been able to cite this judgment with actual rigor in two amicus assistances I render. And regardless of whatever you may do, if you have not performed the giving and taking, in whatever way you can establish it or prove it, your adoption will be invalid. So the effect of adoption is that an adopted child severs his relationship from the family of his birth and becomes a member of the family in which he is adopted. And this process is irreversible. Now, this is the most significant part where we are coming in clash with the new legislation, that is the Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act 2015. Then section 16 of HAMA says that if there is a registered deed or a document of pertaining to the adoption and it is recorded, it records an adoption and it is signed by the person giving and taking and the person's accepting, then the court shall presume that the adoption has taken place in compliance with the provisions of the Act unless it is disproved. So putting it very briefly, though there is no provision making compulsory making of a deed of adoption, but if you have a deed of adoption, then there is a presumption in law that the adoption has taken place. So if you have performed the ceremony and you have got a registered adoption deed, it only establishes before a court that the adoption has taken place. Now, in cases where people want to take a child abroad, when there is a within family or a relative adoption, people also undergo a process whereby they go to the family court or there is a collusive decree of declaration for declaring the adoption deed as valid. So this is the long and short of the conventional Hindu law of adoption. Now, as Justice Dayal put it very well, the Bible of adoption law is Lakshmikant Pandey, brilliantly authored by Justice Bhagwati and capturing the whole sequence of the gamut of adoption in 3 successive judgments. But the principal one is of 1984. This is 1984, Volume 2, SCC 244. So 1984 2 SCC 244 was the most comprehensive judgment laying down guidelines on inter-country adoptions. Now, this was because in the matter of inter-country adoptions, there were no procedures and all adoptions of children to foreign jurisdictions were necessarily requiring that after you did the process of adoption by an adoption deed or a Hindu adoption in case you were Hindus, you had to go under the Guardian and Wards Act and become a guardian to the child you had adopted. So it was a very anomalous procedure in law, and it was a long-winded process, but it also led to trafficking and sale of children, and it became a bone of contention till Supreme Court very ably in 3 successive judgments in a chain crystallized the process of adoptions. Now, simultaneous, then I may just read out one para from 84 2 SCC, where Supreme Court said we may make it clear at the outset that we are not concerned here with cases of adoption of children living with their biological parents. For in such class of cases, the biological parents would be the best persons to decide whether to give their children in adoption to foreign parents or not. It is only in those cases where children sought to be taken in adoption are destitute or abandoned and are living in social or child welfare centers that it is necessary to consider the normative and procedural safeguards which should be forged for protecting their interest and promoting their welfare. So, inter-country adoptions, the streamlining of the procedure was essentially what the Supreme Court was looking at. Now, the signatures or accession by India of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child essentially created the need for India to relook at the Juvenile Justice Act of 2000. And thereafter, when the child was recognized as a person requiring a right to be adopted, right to a family, right to a nationality, right to a home, that the JJ Act was amended in the year 2006, and Section 41 of the Act came about, and the JJ rules of 2007 came about for adoption, for procedure, laying down a procedure for adoption of abandoned, orphan, and surrendered children. So this was the first time that CARA, which is now an authority, but at that time was Central Resource Adoption Agency. It was an agency at that time, that this process somehow got coined. But then Justice Ruma Pal's brilliant judgment in Anokha again reiterated what Lakshmikant Pandey said. Now, Anokha is AIR 2004 Supreme Court. Anokha is AIR 2004 Supreme Court 2080. Now, Anokha says, now Anokha was a very unique case where an Italian couple had taken in adoption the daughter of a taxi driver who used to ferry them up and down when they were visiting India, and who had died, and the couple had taken a fancy to the child. They wanted to adopt the child. The mother gave the child in adoption, but CARA stepped in to say, you can't do it without us. The matter reached the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that the inter-country adoptions through CARA were, in the context, quote unquote, it says, the aforesaid observations only pertain to children who have been or are sought to be relinquished or surrendered in adoption in general to a placement agency or other institution where there is no contact between them and the adoptive parents at all, and not to cases where the child is living with his or her parents and it is agreed to be given in adoption to a particular couple who happen to be foreign. Then the court says none of these provisions in the several sections of this code impinge upon the rights of the choice of an individual to give his or her child in adoption to named persons who may be of foreign origin. The court in such cases has to deal with the application under Section 7 of the Guardian and Wards Act and dispose of the same as being satisfied that the child is being given in adoption voluntarily after being aware of the implications of adoption, viz. That the child would be legally belong to the adoptive parent's family, uninduced by extraneous considerations, such as receipt of money, and the adoptive parents have produced evidence in support of the suitability, and finally, that the arrangement would be in the best interest of the child. So the Supreme Court said, please give the NOC to this child. This child will be rehabilitated to the family, and the child will be able to leave the country. Now, there is another standalone decision by the Supreme Court in Stephen John Becker, where Justice Gogoi, in a brilliant judgment, united a 11-year-old girl with a 55 or a 60-year-old lady as a single parent to let the child leave the country. Now, the stumbling block came when the Kara, the family court, and the High Court, all three disagree that this child cannot go with this lady who is a single parent because of the age. In the guidelines, adoption guidelines, if the parent is beyond a certain age and the child is of a younger age, then the adoption is disallowed. Because the child had been so long with the adoptive mother in India, the Supreme Court said, dehorse the provisions of the regulations. The child is bonded, the child is getting a better future, the child will be loved, the child will be cared, let the child go. So this is the extent to which judicial interference clips the wings of the tight rules of Kara, which somehow or sometimes step in and which are creating a stumbling block on certain adoptions. Now, Kara's role may be good in a lot many cases, but the point is, what is Kara doing to Hindu adoptions is what the zigzag trajectory is what I'm leading to. So, coming back to our flow of thoughts. Now, in 2003, India also signed the United Nations Convention on Protection of Children and Cooperation in respect of inter-country adoptions. So 1993, the Adoption Convention is signed by India. Now, by virtue of signing the Adoption Convention of 2003, India had to bring in all the requirements of the Adoption Convention into the domestic law of India, which means that the JJ Act required a very exhaustive amendment, and all provisions pertaining to inter-country adoption of children, which are contained in the Adoption Convention of 2003, had to be perforce made part of Indian law. So if we sign a convention, we have to fall in line with the convention, because we are getting into an international network on implementation of a law which is applicable universally to all signatory countries of the Adoption Convention. So how does the Adoption Convention work? The Adoption Convention works by creating a body called a central authority. Every country which signs the convention creates a central authority. In India, Kara is the central authority. So Central Adoption Resource Agency became Central Adoption Resource Authority. So Kara is now a central authority under the Adoption Convention of 2003, and Kara performs all the statutory obligations, the statutory duties, which are required by India to be observed by virtue of the signing of the Adoption Convention 2003. In my humble view, the biggest flaw which permeates, which surrounds Kara, and which is problematic in Kara is that Kara is manned by people of administrative capabilities. It is controlled by people with qualities and ingredients which are only manned, which are only good for administrative reasons. I think Kara's so-called chief executive officer or chairperson should be a retired honorable judge, if not of the Supreme Court, then of the High Court at least. Why I say so? This is because I think that to head Kara, you need serious application of mind with judicial training, understanding of laws of different countries, and implications of in domestic law like Hamma, and putting into effect the best interest in the welfare of the child by virtue of judicial training, maturity, experience, and the wisdom attributed to an honorable Judge August office. Now, it is because of this fallacy that Kara is suffering from procedural imbalances and I think wrong reasoning, incorrect interpretation, and somehow to a certain extent, a misconception of certain provisions of Kara is creeping in. This is creating a big problem in inter-country adoptions, particularly when they are done under Hama. And this is causing different views coming from different high courts on what is to be done to adoption under Hama in respect of inter-country movement of children. So very briefly, what does the JJ Act do now? Section 1, subsection 4 talks that the provisions of JJ Act will apply to children in need of care and protection. 1, 2, children in conflict with law, and it lays down the procedures for adoption of children and reintegration and restoration of children in need of care and protection. So basically, children in conflict with law, juveniles, as you may call them, or children in need of care and protection are the ones who are covered under this act. Now, section 2, subsection 13 defines children in conflict with law, 214 children in need of care and protection. Then section 2 defines an abandoned child, also defines an orphan child, surrendered child. Then 222 of the JJ Act defines adoptions, and 234 defines inter-country adoptions. 2.3 defines adoption regulations. Kara has been given a free hand in making adoption regulations. 2.7 defines the authority. 2.9 is a provision I have often read. This is the only provision in the entire gamut of laws which defines the best interest of a child. So be it adoption, be it abduction, be it maintenance, best interest of a child defined in section 2.9, I'll read quickly, is a wonderful definition, and I have been able to trace on it in child removal matters. So best interest means basis for any decision taken regarding a child to ensure fulfillment of his basic rights and needs, identity, social well-being, and physical, emotional, and intellectual development. So if there is a child in need of care and protection, be it through adoption or be it through removal, when one parent is infringing on the rights of the others, it's a child in need of care and protection. So this is the barometer, this is the scale, this is the handicraft of the judge to tailor the needs of the best interest of the child. And this is why I think to decide what is the best interest of the child, you need a judicial mind. And therefore, I have in my earlier sessions criticized the amendment of the definition of the word court to mean an executive magistrate, because an executive magistrate has neither the inclination, nor the energy, nor the training, nor the intellect, nor the makeup to decide the best interest of the child. A child is not a chattel, child is not a traffic permit, child is not a license, quota, or a sanction or a grant, which can be dealt with administratively by clerks and handed over to an executive officer who will perhaps sign the adoption order without even realizing what he has signed. So this is, I think, a fatal mistake which has taken place. And I would blame it to the simple reasoning that the people who processed this amendment in Kara did not realize that this is something which ought not to have been done. Their explanation is courts take too long to decide. Courts are very slow. There are a lot of areas. But these are ills of the system. We can't sacrifice the best interest of the child on the altar of delay and say, no. An executive magistrate will do faster. But look at what is the damage that you will do. You look at the reversal of Lakshmikant Pandey. As Justice Dias very rightly put it, what Lakshmikant Pandey, Justice Bhagwati developed as a jurisprudence since 1984, and which has taken 30 years to structure, create, modify, and fit in a system, has been in one stroke in 2021 made zero. So adoption is not a trade. Adoption is not a business. Adoption is adjudication of the best interest of the child, which perhaps needs to go into a different mode. So that be so. Now we come to what is the requirement of the UNCRC and the Adoption Convention before I move into the controversial sections of the JJ Act. Now, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which India has signed and which is fundamentally intrinsic to the Indian system, is Article 6 talks of every child having an inherent right to life. Article 7 saying child has a right to a name, nationality, and parentage. Then Article 8, right of the child to an identity, to a name, to a family, to relations and nationality. Then Article 9, right of the child not to be separated from his parents. Article 10, right of a child and his parents of family reunification. Then Article 18, rights of children for upbringing by both parents. Article 20, right of child to a family environment. And Article 21, right of best interest of the child in adoptions. So this is the fundamental fulcrum which we can take in even in abduction matters, because we have not signed the Abduction Convention, but the inherent rights of the child under the UNCRC is fundamentally very good to us. Then we come to the Adoption Convention. Now in Adoption Convention, Article 1 talks of the system of recognition and cooperation in inter-country adoptions among contracting nations to safeguard the rights of children being adopted. Article 2 talks of application of the convention to all contracting states. Article 4 talks of the requirements of inter-country adoptions. Article 5 talks of the suitability of prospective adoptive parents. Article 6 talks of designation of a central authority in a contracting state, as we have CARA. Article 14 talks of the application procedure in a contracting state. Article 16 talks of the satisfaction of eligibility of parents to be taken in, who want to take an adoption. Article 16 talks of the preparation of a report for eligibility for adoption. Article 17, suitability of prospective adoptive parents. Article 18, steps of child to leave state of origin. Article 19, satisfaction of receiving state for receiving a child. Article 20 talks of keeping central authorities informed of the adoption process. Article 21, measures to be taken by central authorities in the best interest of the child. Article 23, recognition and effects of adoption. Article 28, exemption of the convention from domestic law of adoption. And Article 37 of the application of different legal systems in regard to adoptions. So this is broadly what the Adoption Convention lays down. Now the most contentious section is section 56. Now section 56 of the JJ Act says, now this is the opening section of chapter 8. Now it says adoption shall be resorted to for ensuring right to family for orphan, abandoned and surrendered children as per provisions of the JJ Act and rules made under and adoption regulations made by the authority. Then 56.2, adoption of a child from a relative by another relative, irrespective of their religion, can be made as per the provisions of this Act and the adoption regulations framed by the authority. So, one important sidetrack here, the JJ Act is a secular law, and the Supreme Court judgment in Shabnam Hashmi's case is where the Supreme Court has said that all adoptions under the HAMA are under the provisions of the HAMA, but insofar the JJ Act is concerned, it is a secular law. So whether you are a Hindu, whether you are a Christian, or whether you are a Muslim, the judgment in Shabnam Hashmi 2014 4 SCC 1, 2014 4 SCC 1, Shabnam Hashmi. Now, Shabnam Hashmi, basically a judgment rendered by Justice Gogoi, has said that the JJ Act is a secular law enabling any person, irrespective of religion if he professes, to take a child in adoption. It is akin to the Special Marriage Act that enables any person to get married under the act, that is Special Marriage Act, irrespective of the religion. So therefore, the Supreme Court says that the JJ Act as amended is an enabling legislation which gives the parent an option to adopt an eligible child by following the procedure under the JJ Act, the rules and the CARA guidelines. So it is something what Supreme Court says is in line with Article 44 of the Constitution of having the equal law for all. So it is in this context, the Supreme Court says that this is an optional legislation that does not contain an unavoidable imperative, and it cannot be stultified by principles of personal law, which however would always continue to govern any person who chooses to so submit himself until such time we achieve a uniform civil code. So in a sense, what does Shabnam Hashmi do? It says you have a choice. You can go under Hama if you are a Hindu, or if you choose not to go under Hama, you can go under the JJ Act, which is a secular law, and therefore you can adopt it under Hama. Now, there is an interesting facet from another perspective under Hama. Now, under Hama, if you have a girl child, you can't adopt a girl child. If you have a male child, you can't adopt a male child. So we had the example of a case in Bombay, and a wonderful judgment authored by my Lord Justice D.Y. Chandrachud when he was an honorable judge of the Bombay High Court. This is the judgment in re-adoption of Payal. Now, this is reported as 2010-1 Bombay Civil Reports, BOM-CR 434, 2010-1 Bombay BOM-CR 434. Now, the question raised here is, there was a couple who wanted to adopt a girl child. They already had a girl child. So there was an objection that these people cannot adopt a girl child because they are Hindus by religion. So the court, while hearing this petition, said that this is a very interesting question on the interpretation of Hama and the JJ Act. And they said the issue is whether a Hindu couple governed by Hindu law, having a girl child of his own, can adopt a child of the same gender under the provisions of the JJ Act. Now, after expounding the provisions, the court has said they have a biological daughter. They are Hindus by religion. They have obtained a guardianship under the provision of the Guardians and Wards Act of a minor female child of the same sex. The child whom they assume guardianship fits the description of the child in need of care and protection. So they are very much eligible to adopt a girl child. Now, at a time when this judgment was rendered, this was quite a path-breaking view because the law had not developed to such an extent. But this shows the level and extent of the provisions of the flexibility carved out by the JJ Act, which permitted adoption, which actually is coming into play. So coming back to reading section 56, now the section 56, subsection 3 says, nothing in this act shall apply to adoption of children made under the provisions of Hama. Now, this is the biggest source of contention in all adoption under Hama. I'll read again. Nothing in this act shall apply to adoption of children made under Hama. Now, I have argued as an amicus twice, and the Delhi High Court has also, Justice Pratibha Singh in a judgment authored last week, has held, and so has Justice the Kerala High Court held in Siva Rama's case, that the JJ Act does not apply to adoption under HAMA. So Section 56(3) is a code in itself. It has to stand out. The problem comes when we read 56(4) and 56(5). 56(4) says all inter-country adoption shall be done as per the provisions of this Act and the adoption of regulations framed by the authority. So the question which Kara advocates is that if you are doing an inter-country adoption, be it under HAMA, be it under JJ Act, you have to follow the drill, you have to follow the mandate, you have to follow the procedure laid down under the JJ Act and the adoption regulations. Then next question, again controversial, 56(5). Any person who takes or sends a child to a foreign country or takes part in any arrangement for transferring the care and custody of a child to another person in a foreign country without a valid adoption order from a court shall be punishable under subsection 1 of section 80. So if there is an inter-country adoption and you do not follow the procedure and get a court order, then 56(5) says it is punishable under section 80. Now there is, then the other provision is section 60. Now 60 says that procedure for inter-country relative adoption. So if there is an inter-country relative adoption, now this is a bone of contention when there is an adoption under HAMA. Now in HAMA, parents are giving, parents are taking. So 60 says a relative living abroad who intends to adopt a child from his relative in India shall obtain an order from the court and apply for a no objection certificate from the authority in the manner provided for in the adoption regulations. So there is a fallback on the procedure of adoptions laid down in the adoption regulations. Now, very briefly, what is the procedure laid down in the adoption regulation and under the JJ Act? So the system operates in a way, wherever you are in whatever part of the world you are wanting to adopt a child, you are in a convention country. You will, under the system of the country, apply to the local central authority in wherever country you are, and you will register yourself for taking a child in adoption. In India, there is a system by abbreviation CARINGS, in which you register. So depending on your choice, your seniority, you will be put in the system in your country. A local agency will make a home study report. That report will be sent to the central authority of the country from where you wish to adopt a child. They will match your profile with the child. If it is suitable, you will obtain a pre-foster care order. You will be introduced to the child. If all goes well, after another report by Kara, you will go to a court and get a court order. And then ultimately Kara will give an NOC and you will take the child out of the country. Now the question which comes for contest is, if you have done an adoption under HAMA and it is an inter-country relative adoption, will you be required to go through the process in Kara? Would you be sent to Kara to get an NOC? Now, when the matter came up in a domestic case, in Siva Rama's case, as I started with in the beginning. So in 2021 KLT 294, 2021 KLT 294, in Siva Rama's case, the Kerala High Court was 56(4) and 5 says, if you are doing an inter-country relative adoption, you will mandatorily be required to obtain a NOC from Kara, and obviously that will only be issued once you have followed the procedure of Kara to adopt the child. Now, when it came to a domestic adoption, when it came to a domestic adoption, In Sivarama's case, in 2020 KLT 294, the Kerala High Court, Justice Dias very clearly held, the Parliament has in its wisdom specifically included 56(3) in the Act of 2015, which substantiate that adoptions carried out under Hama are saved, and that Hama is not repugnant to the JJ Act 2015. So the High Court held that in the case before us, the biological parents gave their child in adoption to the adoptive parents after fulfilling the requirements of Hama, and that too after executing a registered adoption deed. Now, very beautifully it has been said, in giving the child by the biological parents and the taking of the child by the adoptive parents, which is evidenced by the registered adoption deed, the child can never be labeled as an orphan, abandoned, or surrendered child as interpreted by the fourth respondent. If such a view is taken, now these are key words, it would render Hama OTOs and redundant to make it appear that the former enactment is repugnant with the JJ Act, which never is the intention of the lawmakers. Now, this is a very clear view now. Such a narrow and oppressive interpretation cannot be given, particularly when the legislature has consciously included Section 56(3) of the JJ Act, the latter enactment with the intention to permit adoptions under the Hama. There may be instances where a person may qualify to adopt a child under the provision of both Hama and the JJ Act. In such eventuality, especially where there is no repugnancy between two statutes, it would be the choice of the person. Now, this is following Shabnam Hashmi, to offer Hama or the JJ Act. No authority can compel a person to resort to the JJ Act. So ultimately, the Kerala High Court said that the Child Welfare Committee is nobody to interfere in the adoption under Hama. The overzealous role of the CWC in picking up the child and taking it to a foster home was held to be wrong. The child was restored back to the custody of the adoptive parents because the view of the court was very clear. Now, this judgment reflects a lot of clarity of thought, and now having seen the perception of Justice Dias with such a mature understanding and a study of the act, I think he has the perception in very clear terms ingrained in him, and it is in this context that he understands the provisions very clearly, which gives us such a clear interpretation of this law. Now, the next problem comes with the Delhi High Court judgment coming out with a plethora of conclusions. I have circulated this judgment. This is 2021. 2021 SCC Online, Delhi 4246. 2021 SCC Online, Delhi 4246. 2021 SCC Online, Delhi 4246. And the judgment is RK versus Kara. Now in Delhi, they use first names because they don't want to identify children, and they give their names and identity out. Now, this judgment is actually collecting all the judgments which have been rendered by different high courts, and has posed the question before Kara, saying, you have to organize your home. You have to have clarity. You have to come down with an earmarked procedure. You have to clearly spell out what are you going to do to Hindu adoptions. Now, in this judgment, there are 3 cases which have been decided, and in all the cases, there are adoptions under Hama, and in all the cases, natural parents are giving and adoptive parents are taking. There is a giving and taking, and there are problems in the movement of the children, including sending children abroad, and the court is saying that there is too much of red tape. Kara is sitting over the process, and Kara is creating complications, and therefore some guidelines have been issued. Now, prior to that, Punjab and Haryana High Court, in which I was an amicus, rendered a judgment in Jasmine Kaur. This is Jasmine Kaur versus Union of India. JASMINE. Jasmine Kaur versus Union of India. This is 2020, Volume 3, RCR 2020, Volume 3, RCR 528. Now, in this case, I was able to urge the court that this is a domestic adoption. It was an adoption by a sister of the child of her sister. The natural parents gave an adoption. The adoptive parents took an adoption. The mother's sister took an adoption. And Kara sat over the NOC. High Court directed Kara NOC is not, Kara NOC is required, but JJ Act has no application. 56(3 is a standout provision, and therefore NOC should be given. This judgment is under contest, but then this we have graduated into something bigger, and that is what I just explained to you. Now, the judgment of the Delhi High Court is most recent in point of time, and which actually perpetuated the end of the trajectory of the zigzags. This is a judgment dated 31st of August, 2021. And the questions raised in this case, you see, the High Court has gone into all the provisions under HAMA, the regulations, the Act, and after reading 56, 3, 4, and 5, after reading 56, 3, 4, and 5, just a moment. After reading 56, 3, 4, and 5, the court says, these are the questions. First, whether the JJ Act 2015 and the Adoption Regulations 2017 extend to adoptions in respect of children who are not orphaned, abandoned, surrendered, or abused. 1. 2. Section 60 of the Act 2015 only provides for inter-country adoptions by relatives and relatives. How would adoptions be between non-relatives take place? Third, if the JJ Act 2015 has no applicability for adoption under HAMA, should the provisions of the JJ Act 2015 be mandatorily extended to all inter-country adoptions, including those under HAMA? So the High Court very clearly says a conjoint reading of section 56 and 60 clearly show that there is no lacuna or vacuum in law. In view of the clear wording of section 56(3), adoptions under HAMA would not be governed by the JJ Act 2015. Thus, section 56(4) would not be applicable for adoption under HAMA. Now, the word used, nothing in this act in the beginning of 56(3), the Delhi High Court says, is very clear. And in this context, the term nothing in this act would take within its ambit section 56(4) as also section 60. So it's the Delhi High Court says 56(4) and 60, which require the procedure of Kara, is taken in 56(3) and therefore nullified. Thus, insofar adoptions under HAMA are concerned, whether domestic or inter-country, direct or indirect, JJ Act 2015 and adoption regulations would not be applicable. However, this would not mean that adoptions, Hindus under HAMA cannot adopt under the JJ Act. Now, this is again Shabnam Hashmi. Section 56(2) is an enabling provision, and thus even persons governed by HAMA have the option of taking a child in adoption under the JJ Act. However, this is an option. It is not a mandatory or a compulsory obligation. There is some ambiguity whether inter-country adoption between non-relatives is permissible. But under this, in this situation, since the court was only seized of HAMA adoptions between relatives, so this was the only question considered. And thereafter in para 85, the conclusions have been drawn by the court, very succinctly. So para 85 says, an analysis of the various judgments. Now the entire law, different judgments of different courts have been considered. The court says the court comes to the following conclusions. One, the provisions of the JJ Act apply only in respect of orphan, abandoned and surrendered or abused children. Two, in view of the clear exclusion of section 56(3), the JJ Act 2015 will not apply in respect of valid adoptions under Hama, whether domestic or intercountry. Thus, domestic and intercountry adoptions where parties are Hindus and the adoption has already taken place and has been validly carried out in terms of the provisions of Hama do not fall under the purview of the JJ Act 2015. Now, there are judgments of our High Court. There is a full bench very clear saying a passport officer cannot turn around and say, I am questioning the adoption. There is no Kara NOC, therefore I will not give you a passport. The Punjab and Haryana High Court full bench says there are 13 grounds to deny a passport. Kara NOC is not one of them. So therefore, for a passport officer to reopen an adoption and question it is not permissible in law. Now, the Delhi High Court says that Article 37 of the convention, the adoption convention, saves adoptions made under the provisions of domestic law. So 37 of the adoption convention says, in relation to a state which has, in relation to a state which with regard to adoption has two or more systems of law applicable to parents, categories of persons, any reference to the law of that state should be construed as referring to the legal system specified by the law of that state. Now, the Delhi High Court says that if there is a domestic adoption recognized by domestic law, then Article 37 saves that domestic adoption. Now, I also have read 28. Now, 28 says the convention does not affect the law of the state of origin, which required that the adoption of a child habitually resident in the state shall take place in that state, or which prohibits the child's placement in relation to or transfer of the receiving state prior to adoption. So I think this is an exemption, but the Delhi High Court says that the recognition is under Article 37. Now, this is again a debatable issue. But then there is also Article 23 of the convention. It says an adoption certified by the competent authority of the state as having taken place in accordance with the convention shall be recognized with the adoption operation of law in contracting states. Now, this is a recognition under which the Kara issues a conformity certificate. So this is another debatable thing which has come up in this context. So the Delhi High Court, coming back to the conclusion, says in view of Article 37 and other provisions of the convention, adoptions under Hama are duly recognized. So persons belonging to communities other than those governed by Hama may resort to provisions of the JJ Act for effecting adoptions. In addition, persons who are governed by Hama may also have the option of effecting adoption under the JJ Act in view of Section 56(2). Now, after giving these conclusions in paras 91 to 97, the court has passed directions, and the court has also issued certain other mandatory requirements the court wants to be fulfilled. So coming to now paragraph 91 to 97. So 91 says, in view of the fact that currently no permanent mechanism exists for intercountry adoptions under Hama, bearing in mind the welfare of children, which is of utmost importance in case of adoptions, as also to ensure that there is no trafficking of children, Women and Child Development Ministry, Government of India is directed to place a report before the court as to the manner and mode of creating a permanent mechanism to deal with intercountry adoptions under Hama, both direct and indirect, and place a report before the court in 2 months. And until a proper framework is made, the welfare of the adopted child, and to provide a timely mechanism to the biological and adoptive parents in view of inter-country adoptions, it is deemed appropriate to direct CARA to act as the authority for purposes of enabling inter-country adoptions under HAMA. Now, no child can leave India to a foreign country under the adoption convention unless there is a CARA NOC, which is an obligation of the convention. And the visa will not be issued, so therefore NOC is mandatory. There is no existing procedure under CARA for adoption under HAMA. There is a shortened procedure, and therefore they say a similar shortened procedure for an NOC in case of one trick. Or whenever any inter-country adoption takes place under HAMA and an NOC is required for a passport or a visa, the CARA will make a special committee and verify the following antecedents. So they say they will verify the biological parents, consent of the parents, details of ceremony conducted, details of adoption deed, court order, home study, etc. And then CARA will record its satisfaction and grant an NOC in this situation. But they have the Delhi High Court has directed broad guidelines to be made by CARA on the basis of the above directions and create a specific form on its portal describing the guidelines within 4 weeks. CARA is also directed to carry out change on its website because CARA apparently says that any adoption under HAMA are invalid. So that was the wrong direction. So in para 103, the Delhi High Court has issued directions that the Government of India has to file a report on creating a permanent mechanism under CARA for inter-country adoption and place it before the court in 2 months. And they should frame guidelines for processing NOCs for adoptions under HAMA and make available all the relevant forms in this perspective. So this is the zigzag trajectory which has led to this end. And I think what has gone wrong is that in their zeal and zest to make amendments by watering down the JJ Act in the rules and in the adoption regulations, the spirit and import of adoptions has got lost. And CARA has tried to take over the adoption process under HAMA. HAMA is a standalone enactment. 56.3 is a code in itself. It stands out. The intention of Parliament was very clear in saving Hindu adoptions. But then the problem of CARA NOC for a child to be taken abroad in an inter-country adoption, whether between relatives or outside relatives, remains a burning question. So this is the fulcrum of the entire discussion. So I have to hand over the floor back to Shyam for whatever questions and observations which come across.
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful way in which it has been presented and the in-depth discussion that we had. Maybe go back to Dias sir for his comments on the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Anil Malhotra, for the wonderful session. It's covered the latest trends and decisions laid down by the different high courts. I'm not supposed to. I don't want to comment on anything on the excesses of CARA as told by Mr. Malhotra. But I would say that we have to always keep in mind it's the paramount welfare and the best interest of the child that is to be concerned. And that is what the law says, and that is the well-settled principle. So hopefully we will have a better legislation, or things will be set at rest. And we feel that the Parliament should reconcile both the legislations to hold the field in their respective spheres. Thank you, Mr. Malhotra, for the wonderful speech.
Thank you, Dias sir. Over to you, Justice Ramashin, sir.
It's really, whenever you are hearing Anil Malhotra on family law or adoption, it will be just like a feast. So there is no doubt in it. But I don't think that going through the provisions and also the decisions cited by Anil Malhotra, there is any possibility of doubt coming in the mind of the CARA on these aspects. Because if you read it, if you go by the purpose of the JJ Act, it is only intended for the purpose of the category of persons who have been brought under the section. And as regards adoption is concerned, as rightly pointed out by Justice Jayas in some of the decisions he has rendered on that subject, that it being a secular one, those who are restricted to have adoption in the personal law can adopt this. There is nothing wrong in it, because when you go for an adoption under the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, there are certain restrictions placed. You cannot have the adoption of your like. But when such persons want to have adoption of their choice, the JJX gives a room for that. There is nothing wrong in taking that provision and getting an adoption. But the 56.3 also makes it clear that excludes the adoption that has been done under the HEMA also, because they did not say that they can go into the question of validity, but even in the Sivaram's case, Justice Dias has observed that they can go into the question regarding the otherwise disproved. So the validity of the adoption, if it is done not in tune with the provisions made or with the consent of the parties, something beyond has gone, there is a limited scope of jurisdiction for those authorities to go into that. They cannot go into the validity as such, but they can go into the bona fides of the adoption, etc. Then once it is found that it is bona fide, there is nothing wrong in it. The 4 and 5 came only because of the convention of the international convention when inter-country adoption is made without getting there, because that is also one of the safeguarding provisions. I can't say that it is wrong. Safeguarding provisions which say that you will have to get an NOC if you want to go outside India, for which a central authority is required. That authority is also bound by section 56.3. They cannot say that it is perma facie, it is once it is adoption is under the HEMA, they will not conduct. You go to the court and get an order. So I don't think that if the purpose of the act and also the intention of the legislature and also the provisions of the convention, articles of the conventions are rightly understood in the way in which it will not be understood, because I am underlying every word, the way in which it has to be understood for the purpose of protecting the interest of the children whenever they are going back, because now the traffic is being happening. So in order to avoid the possibility of a trafficking in the case of a legal method, if there is any doubt regarding that, to that extent, limited inquiry can be done. And once it is found that it is a bona fide adoption under the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, I don't think that the CARA can withhold the necessity of issuing NOC. So it is only all the understanding of the law, as rightly pointed out by Justice Malhotra. This is being handled by persons who are not having the legal background, though claim to be having legal background for the purpose of all those purposes. That there arises the question of the controversies and also the delay in dealing with those aspects. So I don't think that the law is clear. When the law is clear, there is no necessity for any further. Anyhow, we will, on the basis of the directions given by the Delhi High Court, probably we think that something will come with some clarity, which will not give any room for any confusion or added confusion to the CARA to further delay it. Thank you very much.
So the problem comes, as I see it, parents adopt under HAMA, but they have to sit in India for 2 years, 3 years, waiting for CARA to act, and CARA does nothing. Then they go to court. Then when they get a favorable decision, CARA files an appeal. So the problem is, what happens to the child if the parent goes away? Or what if the child is stranded with the parent here? This is the problem. On the one hand, you want to say we have amended the definition of court to bring in district magistrate because we want to expedite it. But on the other hand, they are reversing adoption under HAMA. So this is not a good thing. This is not in the best interest of children. That is what the Delhi High Court has noticed, and this is the problem coming repeatedly before different high courts.
No, that is the reason I said it must be only for the purpose of limited jurisdiction of the word, unless it is disproved.
Sir, you see a passport officer is behaving like a super boss. He says, I will not bring CARA NOC. who are you? Where is your authority? So this, and then he defends his action in court because he has the ability to go to the CGSC, who will stand up and say, no, it can't be done. I had this occasion, the CGSC was pulled up by the court saying you're supposed to assist me.
No, that is the reason in the Delhi court or Delhi High Court also said NOC is required because of the international convention.
Sir, the NOC is a mandate because the embassy will not give you a visa. But then you have to go to the convention and say under the convention the adoption is in accordance with the domestic law. Therefore, without going into the nitty-gritty of JJ Act, give the NOC under the convention, because the Hama is a parallel law. So if Hama is complied with, you don't have to comply with JJ Act also. But then there is an overzealous officer sitting in Kara saying, you have not followed JJ Act. You never came to us. And then people like Sham come in and file writ petitions.
And Anil Malhotra has to come as amicus curiae to help.
Correct, correct.
No, in Punjab and Haryana High Court, I had done matters. So I told the Honorable Court, I said, I have these certificates of domestic adoption being approved by a conformity certificate, and the writ petition is allowed on the basis of the conformity certificate given by me. So the CGSE said he's pleading for the petitioner. I said, I'm assisting the court. But a very interesting perception which Justice Pratibha Singh has propounded in a bigger way, because Delhi is the hub where all litigations gather. And I think it is well said. And I'm sure it will catch the eye of the Supreme Court, and we will come up with another Lakshmikant Pandey or another. Because Justice Ruma Pal also went very much out of the way. Justice Gogoi went out of the way in Stephen John Becker and Justice Ruma Pal in Anokha. So you need a bigger mind, you need a bigger thought. You look at the child, you don't look at the law in general, and you don't try to clog the best interest of the child and obstruct the flow of the child by your technicality of law. This is, I think, the spirit which is probably coming from Justice Dias and Sivarama. Beautifully written judgment. Compliments, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, maybe the novelty of the subject and the clarity of presentation. We have only very few doubts and questions today. So I request Rao sir for the concluding remarks.
Sham always puts me into this situation. Good evening, everybody.
He will, as aviation expert, he will again make me go into
No, the absence of blame is being taken over by Rao.
I understand, sir. Sir, excellent articulation. We should thank Justice Dias for coming out with this beautiful judgment. And as Anil Malhotra sir said, the problem is the priest in the temple. That is the bureaucrat. And whenever there's a clash between the bureaucrat and the judiciary, the bureaucrat tries to get the upper hand because first he's not accountable to anybody, either for money or for the decisions taken. And the political masters will cover him. So that's one issue where, as far as bureaucrats are concerned. As Mr. Anil Malhotra said, laws have to evolve with time. I mean, you cannot have a bureaucratic setup that is going to harm a family relation. There's a child looking for a family. There's a family looking for a child. And it complements each other. Or should I say, they supplement what is lost in a relationship. Maybe some parents cannot have children and they don't, and they've tried everything possible under the earth, and this is the last recourse is adoption. But then to have a bureaucrat come and sit in 3 months, as you said, 3 years or 2 years, parents may get fed up, they may leave and go, or the child is stuck, saddled to the parents. It's rather unfortunate. I mean, I like I said, as you said, he will give you an aerial view. So, but then I face the bureaucrats every day and I see them every day. So I know what you must be going through. Because even after you get a judicial order, there is some, like, I hope nobody goes and challenge what Justice Dias has done today. You see, because it will put to naught everything that has, maybe they have gone a little bit out of the way to put into perspective the right things. But then there is a bureaucrat who doesn't like it. He will say, we'll go and appeal. As you said, Kara always appeals for everything because there is no accountability. The fact is nobody has ticked off Kara for going in appeal when it was not required. And that is bound to be a problem everywhere. So you can be amicus curiae, but then you are not amicus curiae to them. And that is what hurts them. They say, is Anil Malhotra more learned, more educated than I am? So the bureaucrats come with this that we are cream de la cream. Because out of 1 crore or 3 crores or 5 crores, I get selected. But they're forgetting today the bureaucrat cream is curdling today, sir. And that is going to be a problem at any given stage. Whatever best the judiciary would like to do, you will have the bureaucrat and the politician wanting his pound of flesh. And that is going to be the biggest wall, or they just try to stonewall things. For what? नहीं, आप हमारे पास पहले नहीं आए, आप वहां क्यों गए, आप इनके पास क्यों गए, आप उधर क्यों गए? Why did you get this order? You don't know what predicament you put us in. Now, not one, there are thousands of cases that will disappear immediately. So they are looking to, I don't know whether I can use this phrase, but butter their bread, but that you cannot do it at the cost of lives, at the cost of emotions, at the cost of bonds. And just as you said, a judicial mind takes into consideration all this. A bureaucrat is not trained. The bureaucrat is just trained ke haan, ye law hai, just try and interpret it. That's it. Usme human element mat dalna, emotion mat dalna. I agree, courts don't go for emotion. But when child, mother, parents are involved, there is, whether you like it or not, emotions will come into play. Because at the end of the day, you're tearing a child away from some parent who wants the child, and you're tearing a parent away from the child who wants the child. So the judicial application mind is the best place because they have seen it all. In fact, a judicial officer, when he sits either in the family court or anywhere, can see through what is happening. He can read through. He's trained. A bureaucrat is not trained. A bureaucrat is only trained कि हाँ ये law है आप interpretation दे दो. That's how it works. Masuri doesn't do any great shakes. And that is always going to be a problem irrespective of the judicial reforms that will come into place. The judiciary can try to put into place a lot of things in the right perspective with all factors put in, but you will have, like when you go to the temple, the priest is the only one who can do the abhishek to the god. Then you can't go into the sanctum sanctorium. And the bureaucrats are exactly that. And as you said, somebody heading Kara has to be more level-headed, has to have more emotions, has to have more sentiments. And which, as you say, as you speak, as you tell us, we can see the anguish with which you say that they are a stonewalling body more than a facilitating body. And as you said, a passport officer today, like a passport, it's not only a passport officer. You go to any bureaucrat, he says, "Bahar baitho, main busy hu." He's doing nothing, but bahar baitho. And then you say, "Sir, kar do na, sir, this, sir, that's it." And that's exactly the ball game that goes through. Anyway, sir, Anil Malhotra, sir, as usual, excellent articulation. Well, I think everybody would have gained at least 99% more of what they would have thought of coming into this platform at this point of time. And once again, Shyam sir, thank you for this platform for everybody, where we can put in our views and not be scared of being pulled up or hauled up or done anything.
Thank you.
Sir, today you have protection of the bench, so you can get away.
Thank you, Rao sir. A fantastic Saturday evening, I would say. And in the 240th session tomorrow, we'll have a talk on criminal enforcement of environmental laws in India. It will be the faculty is Dr. Jacob Joseph. He's the associate professor and head of postgraduate and research studies department, Bharat Mata School of Legal Studies. He had addressed us earlier when he was in Nuance. Ramashan sir, you may not be able to make it, right?
No, I will do one thing. I will try, because I cannot assure you. On the way of my travel, if I can able to connectivity, I will try to.
Sir, I'll
Give
do
the
one thing.
introduction. Don't put my name. If my basis, because once you put a name, I will be committed to come. I will do one thing. If I am present, I will make the introduction and then vanish. That is, I try to do that.
Absolutely, sir. That'll be wonderful. So as we come to the end of the 239th session of Legal Empowerment through Interaction Lecture Series, let us first thank Justice Dias, sir, for taking time off and being part of this Littles family. So you have been always a support for us, and we hope to see you quite often on this platform. And before I thank Anil Malhotra, sir, as I have been doing usually, I'll thank Justice Mastaq, sir, for introducing you to this platform, and then you, sir, of course. Anil Malhotra, sir, for the wonderful session, the clarity with which, the way in which I'd say that the topic, the passion you have for the topic, just like Rao sir said, that is very much apparent on the way in which you present it. It is not just an academic or a moral wisdom that is being thrust upon, but you feel it, you have it, and you deliver it. That is something entirely different. I mean, pedagogical skills of a higher platform, I'd say. Thank you, Justice Ramakrishnan, sir, for your valuable presence and inputs, and all of you wonderful participants for being part and parcel of this journey of discovery, enlightenment, and empowerment. So till we meet again tomorrow, 10:30, please do take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.